Let's talk about BRICS and the global financial and economic system. So in this video, I'm going to look at cycle analysis, astrological cycle analysis, in order to understand what the impact of BRICS will be on the global economy if there will be a new currency, and maybe a gold-backed currency introduced by BRICS in order to replace the dollar as the hegemonic currency of the world, and if so, when? All of this you're going to find out in this video, so let's go for it. All right, so if you follow the world and everything that's happening on the global stage, in the global political economy specifically, I'm sure you know that this is a very important transition phase that we're going through right now from one hegemonic system, from one kind of integrated system with its own, hegemonic military dominant force, which was the US, and the financial and economic systems around it with the IMF and the World Trade Organization and everything else around it. And all of that system is coming to an end, and we're going into a new system. And the shape of this new system, it's not really fully known yet. It is something to be debated about in the best case, and in the worst case, there is going to be wars around it. When you look back in history, the transition phases, there were always wars. All the big wars in history, they always fall in these transition phases, which are cyclical. They always come back every 120 years or so. On average, we have one of these big transitions. So the current transition that we're in, it's already definitely starting with regards to the dominance of the dollar as the lead currency of all economic activity being very quickly eroded. Yeah. So in all of our lifetimes, this is completely new. The dollar hegemony is a system that was established after the Second World War in the Bretton Woods system, and with it the IMF and so on, the institutions which were there to protect the system. Then we had an important break around 1971 when the dollar was depegged from gold, and it kind of started to allow the Fed in America to print as much money as they want, and thereby really throw the rest of the world into inflation as well. And I also, when you look at it, also this was used as a tool to take money away from people, to redistribute money, redistribute wealth really towards a small oligarchic elite, a financial elite. But this system was nonetheless in place. It's continued. Very importantly, what has kept it in place is the petrodollar, so that the fact that the oil is sold by all oil-producing nations globally in dollars, in US dollars. That was the case until very recently, and it's no longer the case with the recent developments, with the recent changes. Saudi Arabia, the greatest, biggest oil producer in the world, they already started to move away from the petrodollar. A lot of others are starting to move away. And all of this together is happening together with BRICS, the union or the organization that has the leading contender states, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They're the states that originally composed this. And then you had the other states that just joined recently, Iran and Saudi Arabia and Egypt and others who have joined recently. And this group of states, the BRICS, is really starting to challenge the hegemony of the petrodollar and of the US hegemonic system globally, and also of the US dollar especially, right? So of all of these systems which basically keep everything else, the rest of the global economy, tied to the US dollar. All of that is starting to crumble. But in order for it to really move into a next system, a new system, obviously what's necessary is an alternative currency. And right now, the BRICS states don't have this alternative currency. So it's not like they're trying to peg everybody to the Chinese yuan or the Russian ruble. Those currencies don't have that role, right? So therefore, it's been discussed by experts, economists, by observers that one big move that the BRICS states can make is to introduce a new currency, a currency which would rival the dollar, which would come into place as the new global currency, the global lead currency. Now, if we want to understand whether the BRICS is going to do this and when they're going to do this, we need to look at astrology, right? So this is why in this video, I'm going to share with you a couple of charts which will shed light on this topic and which will allow you to understand what's going to happen next financially, right? In the global political economy. So what you're seeing here right now is a chart of the BRICS foundation, okay, the foundation of BRICS. So BRICS was founded in Yekaterinburg in 2009, right? And this chart is pretty exact. This is basically the time when they had on that day a Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting on that day before. And then in the afternoon, they came and they announced BRICS. So at that point, it was still BRIC. The South Africa wasn't there yet. It was Lula from Brazil and Xi Jinping and Medvedev from Russia. And at that time, I think it was Singh, who was the prime minister of India, who was there. So the chart, it shows you the nature and the intentions and really the purpose of this organization. Like everything else, the chart always shows us the essence of this thing that we're looking at. And what you can see here is that we got an organization which is it's a brotherhood of sorts, right? So this is Sun with Vesta, right, in the 8th house. So this is a community, a cultic brotherhood, some type of fraternity. A fraternity is basically when you have Vesta with Sun and it's in the 8th house. This fraternity is about resources, right? It's about the management of resources, especially the resources of others, right? So that's the 8th house, and it's transformation and resource management, right? And this is going to be something difficult, challenging. You got Pluto here, right? It's opposite Pluto, the sun. So this organization is going to go through a lot of power struggles, deep power struggles, and it's going to have a very transformative effect on everybody who joins it, right? And you got here in the same constellation still the moon with Uranus, right? So it's going to have a revolutionary effect specifically on the people of the organizations that join this institution, right? Or of the countries rather that join this institution, this organization. And then what we have here, we have at the bottom this powerful constellation which is powering the whole thing, which is Jupiter, Neptune, and Chiron. You can see this here, right? And this is flowing harmoniously into the sun. You see this, right? So what is this? At the bottom, Jupiter, Neptune, right? And it's in Aquarius. You can't really see this here, right, fully, but if I move a little bit, you can, like this. So, you see? So this is basically a utopian mission, right? A big utopian mission. A utopian belief in new systems, right? Aquarius is the new system, the new ideas, basically, the new social ideas, utopian social ideas for the collective. That's Aquarius, right? And you got Jupiter with Neptune and Chiron. So we're talking about big visions which can be healing, right? With Chiron, which can be healing for the collective, right? But there's going to be this kind of element of the big vision to do things differently. And this big vision, it flows harmoniously into the sun, which is the brotherhood, right? The fraternity of nations that have come together, right? And you can already see here that the asteroid Banks is here. So banks are going to play an important role in what BRICS is doing, right? And then we have here, we have the Mercury. You can see here Mercury. Mercury is in 7, and it's a very interesting constellation that we want to look at a little bit closer, because you can understand already why this organization is going to be so focused on the currency. Okay, so let's have a look at it. So you see here what we got here. We have on the Mercury, we've got Goldman, King, and Midas. Okay, so these are the asteroids that are on this Mercury. Mercury is about trade and communication, right? and trade and communication in the 7th house. So, towards others, towards partner states. And the trade and the communication, the Mercury is on the fixed star Alcyone. Alcyone is a very important star. It's a royal fixed star. When you got anything on Alcyone, you're going to get fame for that. This is going to be an idea or a project that is going to get more attention and fame, like on a global scale, right? And this Mercury, so this kind of divinely favored commercial idea, right, with Mercury on Alcyone, it stands with Goldman and Midas. Midas was the king, Midas, right, in the Greek mythology was the king who turned everything to gold, right? The king who turned everything to gold, Midas, right, Midas. On Mercury, the commercial idea, which will be famous, Alcyone. This is how we decode what's written here, right? So already, I can tell you just from this constellation that we have a propensity, right, to think about the gold standard again, right? The gold standard, which was rejected, which was, it was decoupled, basically depegged. The U.S. dollar is no longer connected to gold anymore. We don't have a gold standard right now, and this could be something that makes a comeback with BRICS. Okay. Now, a couple of other things here in the chart as well. Just with the states that that are here, the states that were the founding states, it's interesting to look at what their relationship is to this organization. So you got Brazil here, Brazil very close to the sun. Brazil really identifies with BRICS, right? It gives it, and it gives it a new role, really, right? And a powerful role. And it doesn't matter whether you look at whether it's Lula or Bolsonaro, whether it's the left or the right in Brazil, everybody in Brazil identifies with BRICS, right? So this is Brazil's, Brazil has a very kind of easy relation or a kind of illuminated relation with BRICS. And then you got Russia here. Russia is here, and this is basically, you can't really see this here, but this is opposite the star here, Altair, which is the eagle. And you have here Rahu as well, or the north node. North node, this means that south node is going to be here. The karmic axis is here on Altair, the eagle, which is another fixed star, royal fixed star, very important one. And Russia is here with Satoshi and gold. Okay, so this is important. Russia is on the karmic axis of BRICS together with Satoshi, Bitcoin, and gold. I'm going to come back to that later and interpret this, right? When we look at what's going to happen next, when BRICS will make moves around changing the world economy, okay? So, but before that, we've got two other states here that are interesting. One of them is China, obviously, right? China is on the star Regulus. Regulus is a fixed star, is probably the most powerful fixed star. The royal, is the most royal of the royal fixed stars. And it's with Imperatrix. And all of that is on the MC, on the midheaven, right? So China is perceived as the ruler of BRICS, right? No question. China is perceived, and increasingly more so, China is perceived as the ruler of BRICS, right? So China is there, and Bharat is here. You can see here Bharat is India, right? So Bharat is the name of the ancient name of India. And Bharat is not just there for itself alone. Bharat is, you can see here, it's in opposition to the moon and the Uranus here. You see here, Bharat, opposition, moon and Uranus. So for India, BRICS can be a very revolutionary factor, right? It can change make a big changes for the people. But also India is going to have a more, up and down type of unpredictable relationship with BRICS, right? And this is obviously a large part of that is also due to the fact that China is so strong in BRICS, and there is still rivalry going on between China and India, even though there are also perspectives that might change. Now, that being said, let's look at when we can expect this change to happen, right? So because what I showed you right now is the chart of BRICS, right? Which shows you that at the inception of BRICS, this organization, it was already created with the seed, right? With the DNA, basically, of at some point being a force for revolutionizing the economic system, especially through a type of return to gold, right? A gold standard. Now, BRICS nations, they're already starting to make moves. They created a bank. It's going to be in Shanghai. It's already opened, right? The Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil, friend of Lula, she's leading that bank. And this, this whole endeavor, it's starting to, they're starting to build a counter system, basically. BRICS is starting to build a counter system as an alternative to the current system of IMF and WTO and all of those organizations which are kind of protecting the Western and American-led economic system, right? But obviously the most important step to this will be to introduce a currency, and there's a lot of talks on this, especially from Russia, right? Especially from the Russians, about introducing a new currency, maybe connecting it to a basket of resources, and even potentially having a place for Bitcoin in that, right? This is going to be like where the story gets really crazy and interesting. But now, before I can tell you more on this, we need to look at the historical cycles, so we can understand when these changes can occur and what the context for these changes is, right? Because in order to, I can already tell you this much, that they will occur, right? And I can give you a very exact time, actually, for when I believe the BRICS will introduce a new gold-backed currency, right? But I'm not going to just tell you, I will show you, right? I have to show you in the historical cycles, right? But before I get there, make sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so yet. Also, like this video. Let's push this out big, right? Tell me in the comments as well what you'd like to see next, right? About the global political economy, everything from, global politics and World War III, upcoming kind of tensions on the geopolitics, but also down to the personal and the spiritual and the mythological, which is so important because that's a language that we all need to learn so we can uncode, so we can decode, right? And unravel and unveil everything that's happening around us from a deep perspective, right? So all of this we do on this channel. Let me know in the comments how you engage with this, what you take away from this, and what you like to see next. But now let's go into the chart. All right, so this chart that you see here, it shows you the current planets basically, but what I've got here is just the outer planets. So because we're looking at large scale historical processes, we don't need the small planets. We're looking only at the outer planets in here. And this is important if you want to understand the rhythms of historical development, right? This allows you to understand the big cycles that shape history. And when you look at this, you can already see that we have this important constellation coming up, this constellation here that you can see as soon as I find the right thing, pen, there we go. So of the Pluto-Uranus trine, right? That's coming into being. So this is super important. But if you want to understand how important this is and what role it plays, what it tells us about the monetary system and BRICS, we need to first understand the background a little bit, right? So just a little bit. I'm not going to go through, hundreds and hundreds of years of cycles before, even though I do that for analysis, and I recommend you do that. Nowadays with AI, there is ways to do this really systematically. What's important about this cycle, the Uranus-Pluto cycle, is that it's about the revolutions, Uranus, right, of the collective, underlying collective structures and forms of reality, which is Pluto, right? The collective power, the collective consciousness, right? Uranus revolutionizes from the depths, right? Revolution, Uranus, deep or depths, Pluto, right? It revolutionizes the depths or the base, the foundations, right, of everything. And this cycle, it coincides, it correlates in human history with the big changes of our underlying monetary systems, right? So you can already tell the monetary, the financial systems in some ways, or you could say the geostrategic and geopolitical and geofinancial systems, right? Not just monetary, like the power systems. That's the right term, right? That's the right term because Pluto's power in first and foremost, Pluto is power. And in our day and age, money is power, which is why when we're talking about changing the power system, we automatically talk about changing the financial systems, right? Because power simply, expresses itself as money in our civilization, in our society. So whenever we have this cycle, so all the big revolutions, they fall on this. So when you look here, we had I'm going to go far back here, like really far back. AD 18, I'm in the 19th century right now, and I'm going back here to the French Revolution, right? French Revolution here towards the end of the 18th century, we had an exact opposition of Pluto and Uranus, as you can see here, right? Then we go on, and then we had the new cycle starts in 1848, right? And this was the time when the Communist Manifesto was written, the communist movement, labor union movements, and so on. They were all started. All of that kind of wave of change started, which then culminated in the Soviet Union and so on and so forth, later down in this same cycle, right? Based on this cycle. And a wave of other types of revolutions were throughout Europe around that time, 1848. And then we continue into the current cycle. I'm not going to do all the sub-steps here. This would take several videos to do, right? If I wanted to do all the sub-steps and all the, in-between phases. But then, we come to the current cycle. So the current cycle, it starts in the late 60s, right? The late 60s is when we had the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, right? And this Uranus-Pluto conjunction, this is the cycle that we're in right now. Yeah, it's a long cycle. Like it's a very long cycle, right? 100 and something plus years cycle, right? So this cycle, it's basically, and you can calculate, right? So 120 year roughly cycle, right? So this cycle, it is about the changing the underlying power structures globally with regards to the distribution of power between the core and periphery, between the developed countries and the underdeveloped countries, between the first world and the third world, right? First world and third world. Those are the terms that were used basically, which is why around this time, in the late 60s, when this conjunction starts, you had the emergence of all of these huge anti-imperialist movements, right? And kind of counter-imperialist, this is what they called themselves, right? They were basically the first movements that were challenging the hegemony of the West, right? And of the big kind of first world powers, right? At that point, you had the US, and then a close contender was the Soviet Union, right? But so this is why in the 60s, late 60s, around the time of this conjunction, we had the anti-colonial struggles everywhere in the world. You had Che Guevara basically, trying to revolutionize both South America and then Africa. And you had Patrice Lumumba and Kwame Nkrumah in Africa. And you had the Vietnam War in Vietnam, right? Which is basically corresponded with a large global movement against war and against imperialism. Everybody in the world, people were demonstrating. In Paris, you had the 68 Arts, the French students who were on the streets, and they were trying to bring down the state, right? And the whole system and everything. There was a time of revolutions, and this whole revolutions, the thrust of this was against the hegemonic system that people perceived as being centered in American capitalism. And then with this cycle, it continued, right? So this came into the whole consciousness, right? So I'm not saying this is not necessarily directed against America as such, because obviously in America itself in the 60s, you had also the eruption of counterculture, right? Woodstock and Flower Power and all of these, people who were basically had ideals and ideas of how society could be different and who saw themselves as part of this struggle, really. They saw themselves as part of the same struggle of all of those other people that I just mentioned before. So this is how this cycle starts, okay? It starts in the 60s. And then it continues, right? So we're going to look at the important phases in this cycle. So the next important one is the sextile, right? The sextile, when is it? Here. It's in the 90s. The sextile. So the sextile is a time when we find some kind of a first type of smoothing. It's first type of, okay, here's a solution. Let's make everything smooth, right? Let's kind of, let's get together and let's find a way to unite these forces that are seemingly pulling into different directions by a compromise of sorts, right? And this is what happened in the 90s. So in the 90s, this is the time of globalization, of NAFTA, Bill Clinton going around and make this is the time when it looked like the established system, the dollar system, the World Trade Organization, all of that was the sole winner, and now it would just spread all across the world. And all of these protest movements, they would somehow be integrated. Somehow they would be integrated. They would become like Tony Blair or whatever, right? They would become some type of social democrats, or somehow they would be integrated. Of course, that didn't happen. We already had like the first, counter to that integration as well during that time, right? We had like the Seattle protests, and there were some protest movements, the first type of protest movements against globalization at that time, right? Which emerged as well in the 90s. But it was a kind of a sort of an attempt at an integration, which is what you see when you have sextile, right? Okay, then we continue, and we get to the next stage. The next stage is the square. Okay, we got the square here. You see this? The square, it comes up when? No surprise there, right? If you follow history, if you know a little bit, if you understand the rhythms of history, the square comes in 2010, right? It's actually 2008 to 2012, 13, 14, around that time. And the square, as opposed to the sextile, which is a time of, the sextile is one of compromise and integration, and the square is a time of challenge and breakdown. It's like the first big breaks emerge. Basically, whatever was not possible to integrate during the sextile, it says like it's over. We're breaking out. We're going to go our own way. We're breaking up, right? We're breaking up. This is the time of breakups. And that's the square. And that's what happens during the square. So in the square, you have Occupy Wall Street. You have the global financial crisis, right? The short, the big short, that whole thing, the banking, mortgage crisis, and so on and so forth, right? And then in response to that, you have the protest movements all over the world, right? Occupy was not just in the States, it was everywhere, right? It was a global movement, and even the Arab Spring, right? So you have like protest movements all over the world, which are basically saying like, okay, we're not continuing like this. This doesn't work. And interestingly, BRICS is founded during this square. It's basically the states that, that they don't see themselves represented. They did not see themselves represented in the previous financial hegemonic system, the Bretton Woods system, the dollar hegemony, and so on and so forth. They get together under the square and they say, okay, we're going to lay the foundation for a different future. And was to become, to be called BRICS eventually. So Russia, Brazil, India, China, those states, which at that point, people were saying, oh, okay, these are just developing countries. But, nowadays, if you look at it, not so much anymore. The more time progresses, the more the BRICS nations, when you put them together, they're already larger than the G7, right? They're already larger economically, obviously population-wise, obviously resource-wise. So, if you put them together, they are now more and more so with every year that passes. They are the center of power. They're larger than the Western Bloc, right? Basically, the Western Bloc plus Japan is the G7, right? So now this happens in the square, as I said, right? In the square, we have this breakup happening, the breakups and the breakdowns. And the breakups and the breakdowns in this time, they were around not accepting the financial system the way it was, and trying to break out from that, trying to create something new. But in the square, in the first square, there's no real solutions yet. It's super early. It's just the first decisions are made to do something, right? But no solutions offered, no real momentum to this. All of this is to come later. The real momentum to the change is to come later. When is it to come? Well, at the next important event, at the next important process, at the next important aspect, rather, right? That's the word I'm looking for. The next important aspect. And when is the next important aspect? Well, if you know a little bit about the, cycle science, the science of stars and the science of harmonics between planets, then you know that it's the trine. And the trine, when does it come? Voila. 2024 is the first time that we have the next aspect in this cycle, which is the trine. And in the trine, as opposed to the square, or as opposed to the sextile, which was about integration and compromises, the trine is about actually flowing and harmonious and productive development where the new solutions are put into place. The new solutions emerge. The new solutions are created. The trine is about creations. Creativity is a 3. The number 3 in the harmonics is for creations and creativity. So the trine is where it's going to happen, right? And now, when does this trine get exact? This trine, it gets exact in, you can see here, in 2025, in the year of the Lord, 2025, which is basically, roughly a year from now, we're going to have a clean, a perfect trine. You see here, Pluto at 1 Aquarius, Uranus at 1 Gemini. And these are both fixed stars, royal fixed stars. So we've got Pluto here on Altair, fixed star Altair, the eagle, which is super important royal fixed star, and Uranus on Alcyon, which is the first degree of Gemini. Super important, super powerful constellation. So this constellation, September 2025. September 2025. Yeah, mark this. I mean, the time around that is going to be the time when the BRICS nations will introduce and will have all the power behind them. They will have all the power behind them around that time, right? And that's going to be the time when the introduction of a gold-backed currency is going to be most auspicious, right? I'm not saying necessarily that's when they will introduce it. It could be before or after, but that's when it will have the most power to come into being, right? That's when really it can change the entire world system, right? So as a very last, just remember as well, I showed you before the chart of BRICS. I showed you the chart of BRICS, and in the chart of BRICS, you saw, I'm not going to go back to show you here, but you saw that the planet, or maybe I will briefly, yeah, just so you know, right, to see how perfectly all of this is arranged. So the planet here, which is on where this constellation will be, right, is Mercury conjunct Midas conjunct Gold, right? Goldman conjunct King, right? So the favored, famous commercial idea of gold, right? Of the golden king, right? For commerce. And this is where this historical constellation of the Pluto-Uranus will be. So the Uranus rather will be exactly here, first degree, right? In 2025. And we'll get that trine from Pluto, which is just, beautiful, basically a beautiful way of saying that that's going to be the time when the new currency, gold-backed currency, will have all the power in the world to change the global financial system. So you can count on this. I'm sure people in future will come back to this video and will see that, not to say that, Dr. V was so great, he predicted all of this, but rather to say that astrology has this capability, right? Cosmic cycle science has this capability, which is why over the next years, more and more people undoubtedly will find out about the science. This video will contribute to this and many others like it, right? So if you want to stay in the loop, if you want to find out more, if you want to learn more, if you want to learn how to do this yourself, All of this we can do together. Let's do this together. Make sure to like this video. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to this video. Subscribe to this channel rather, right? And go in the comments, tell me what you want to see next. And until next time, be blessed, be well, all the best.